Hi! Did not see you there. Sorry, that's really cheesy. Anyway, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of the Expanse Dragon Tooth. And now, if you did not know, if you weren't aware, the Expanse Dragon Tooth is referring to comic books. A group of comic books that just came out for the Expanse. There's 12 issues. Now, I usually, in fact, I will say I haven't read. Well, there's hold on, see it behind me, the Expanse Origins comic, and that was the first comic that I've read in like 25 years, and this group of 12 is the second. So I am not. I got the Countdown to Picard comic, but I never actually read it. Should do that. But point is, I'm not really into comic books. I don't really read them, and it's rare that I do read them. But particularly with like the Star Trek comic books, I know I see them advertised a lot on Facebook and stuff, and saying, "Oh, there's this one with Cisco But I know they're not canon, so I don't. Even if they were, I don't think I'd bother with them. I don't know. I just never been into the Star Trek. I've read some Star Trek novels, but and all these other comics just haven't really been into. But the Expanse, I'm so desperate for material for the Expanse because the book series ended a couple of years ago with the final book. Although I do know that the authors are starting a new sci-fi series, which I don't think it's come out yet. I think I might check it out because they did such a good job with the Expanse. But even though it might be really good, it's still not the Expanse. And there's some short stories, like there was a collection of short stories, which I did buy that book, but I haven't read all of them, so I could do that. But those short stories are good, but they don't have, for the most part, they don't have our main characters, Holden and Naomi and Drummer and Amos. So I wanted something with all of them, Alva Sorella and everyone. So when I heard this comic, hold on, let me find this cool. Here's a cool cover. When I heard this comic advertised, I was like, well, I really want to check that out because I want more Expanse. So the comic, first of all, I'll just say that this review is going to be spoiler free because I assume that most of you haven't read this, so I'm going to stay spoiler free for it. For the most part, there's some, like, if you're like really touchy on spoilers, you want absolutely nothing given away, then obviously I can't do that. So if you're really sensitive, there will be some spoilers, but they're just going to be vague. I'm not going to give away what happens in the end or any specific details about it. But anyway, so I really, when I heard this advertised, I was really into it and the idea of it, and I wanted to read it. And the first thing they said in the advertisement is that it was going to take place between books 6 and 7. But for those of you who don't know, which is a very, very slight spoiler for book 7, for those who only watch the show, but then again, I don't even know if the book 7 through 9 will ever be covered by this show. But anyway, for those not aware, between books 6 and 7, there is a time jump. And for the record, if you're not aware, the show covered up to the end of book 6. So in other words, after the material that you saw on the show, if you haven't read the books, there's supposed to be a 30-year time jump before we get more material. Or at least that's how it was in the books. I've heard some rumors out there that the Apple Plus might pick up the Expanse, but instead of doing book 7, 8, and 9, they would be doing something in between book 6 and 7. I'm like, please don't do that. Just if you're gonna revive the show, finish the fucking books. I don't care about stuff in between. However, with the comics, I do care because I thought it would be, since there's a 30-year gap, there's plenty of material that could be covered in that time. However, the one thing I was unsure of is whether, because they said between books 6 and 7, so I was unsure, will it follow the continuity of the books, or will it follow the continuity of the show? Now, the creator of the comics did put out something that did specify, but I didn't see that until just recently, so I didn't know. And because none of the material I saw clarified whether it would cover the continuity from the books and the show, and there is a significant difference. I think it would be virtually, especially if you're following the main characters, it will be impossible to not pick whether you're following the continuity of the books or the show. But as soon as I saw Drummer, this person here in the comics, I was like, okay, so it's the continuity of the show. Because, of course, Drummer's not really a factor in the books. I mean, she's again, slight spoilers for Book 7. She's a viewpoint character in Book 7, but it's not the same Drummer. And so it could possibly be the book's version of Drummer, but no. As soon as I saw her, I'm like, this is the continuity of the show. And the more I read, the more I saw that Alex was not a main cast member. So again, continuity of the show, because in the books, Alex is still alive, but in the show, come on, you got to see up to season 6. Otherwise, you're asking for spoilers. Alex is dead. So, anyway, so what I did, because the Dragon Tooth Expanse series, I'm just showing all these different. By the way, each issue had like multiple different covers. I only bought one. I'm not gonna buy like each of the different covers. So my covers might be different from yours if you have it. But anyway, point is that there was 12 different comics, or 12 issues, that were released throughout over a year ago. They started, and so when they started, I started collecting them one at a time, but I wasn't reading them. I would just, every month or so, I go to my local comic book store, buy the comic, go home and put it on my shelf. And I was specifically waiting for all 12 issues before I read it. And you know what? I'm very happy I did that way. And I would recommend anyone else to do the same thing, because I just go, each issue is like on an only tiny fraction of the story, so it leaves you wanting, and I couldn't imagine having to wait an entire month to get each issue. Now, of course, if again, I'm not a huge comic collector, but my understanding is it will be hard to get the issues that came out if you haven't bought them already. But there will be, I don't know what they call them, anthologies or graphic novels that have all of the issues in 3 volumes. So there's going to be 3 volumes to the graphic novels. Apparently volume 1's already out. So if you don't have it, you can go out and buy it right now. In fact, as I'm releasing this video, I believe volume 2 will be released pretty much around the same time I'm releasing this review. So you could go out and buy the first 2 volumes out of 3, so it covers, well, my math sucks. It covers the first 2/3 of the whole story. And I believe volume 3 will be out later this year in November. So if you haven't gotten the issues, or you can't find them, which I think most, especially the other ones, might be harder to find, maybe you can buy the first 2 volumes and then find the latest 4 issues. They might still be around, but whatever. Regardless, I am going to remain spoiler free. But I will say that if you haven't read them, I would highly recommend waiting till you have them all before reading them. I don't know, maybe as a devout comic book readers might have a different opinion, saying, oh, that's bullshit, this is what I'm used to in reading comic books. I don't know. As I said, I typically don't read comic books. But I would recommend waiting until you have them all and then reading them in one go, because I am very happy I did that. I was very happy with the results. Now, as to should you read them, I think I'm going to just keep holding them up randomly. But I think the answer should be clear now what my thoughts on that is, and that's, of course, yes, you should. Now, these were not written by James S.A. Corey, which of course is the pen name for Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham. I almost said Ty Abraham. No, Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham. Wasn't written by them. I'm not sure if they read it or they had any say on whether or not these were published. I don't know about that. But I do know that they were written by a fan of The Expanse. And it shows. It really shows that someone who really understood or understands The Expanse, someone who's really excited about The Expanse, wrote these. Because the one thing I will say up front about them is that I'm just going to I keep holding up random issues of it. The one thing I will say about them is that they get the characters so right. Like it's all the characters like really shine through, and they really seem like as they appeared in the show. And there's some, even though it follows the continuity of the show, there are some book nods as well. So it's obvious whoever wrote this understood the books and the show very clearly and understood how the world of The Expanse works. One example, vague example, again, not giving spoilers, but one vague example I will give is Amos, because I could see there would be how there might be a tendency for some people to write Amos as a hero type character, but that's not how it comes off in either the books or the show. He does the right thing only because he follows Holden and Amy, who do the right thing. On his own, he has no real moral compass, and sometimes he can do some fucked up things in the show and the book where you're just like, well, fuck, it makes you question, it makes it clear that he's not like a good guy. And that also comes off in the comic, which I am very impressed with, because as I said, it would be easy for someone who doesn't really understand The Expanse to just try to make him a flat out hero, but it doesn't do that. Look at how bloody he is here. But he doesn't come off as too villainous. He stays within his character as established in the book and show, and that is so awesome that they managed to do that. So all the characters like Drummer, Holden, Alvis Tarala, like they all shine through. Now, getting into the vague spoilers I was talking about, so skip ahead if you're really sensitive. I can see why they would split this series up into 3 volumes, because the story does section off that way. There is 3 distinct parts to it, and the first part takes place almost immediately following the show, the ending of the show, so at the end of book 6, but show continuity. And then there's a 10-year jump, and then you get the next section, and then there's another 10-year jump, and you get the last section. So it still doesn't quite reach that book 7. If I recall correctly, book 7 was 30 years later, and this ends 20 years later. But still, it gave a very interesting... And plus, since following the dynamic of the show, it sort of tells how things might have played differently in these intervening years than they did in the books. Obviously, Alex isn't there, and Drummer's a bigger factor. And yet it still leaves it open enough for if the show were to come back. Where's some wood to knock on it? If the show were ever to come back and develop books 7 through 9, these comics are vague enough where they wouldn't be retconned out of existence, which actually did happen. As I mentioned, I like this cover with Bobby. I'm holding it upside down, but it's kind of do it either way because Bobby and Amos, again, their relationship has developed in season 6, comes off strong in the comics. Anyway, as I was saying, like it could, a lot of the Star Trek novels and comics had been retconned out of existence when future Star Trek shows came out, which is part of the reason why I'm not that into them. There's just this alternate B canon, as people call it. Whereas this stuff, I mean, there maybe, if the show were ever to adapt books 7 through 9, maybe there would be some things that wouldn't, in these novels, in these comics, that wouldn't quite fit. But it would be minor details. I think for the most part, they would slot in nicely, because they slot in quite nicely with books 7, 8, and 9. And I wouldn't say sets it up, but it fits. It fits within that continuity. And it is interesting to see what happens in the intervening years. So, yeah, I love the characters all came out, and they did a good job of bringing back some of the characters. Like, there's Elvie. So I saw the cover, so I knew she was going to be in it. Again, slight spoilers, I guess. But she's on one of the covers of the issues. But anyway, slight spoilers again for who doesn't appear: Prax, Anna, maybe a few others I'm not thinking of. Oh, there are some people, and this I won't give away because it was more of a surprise, but there were a couple of important characters who you wouldn't think to ever see again that popped up in these comics, and I did appreciate that. So, yeah, that one again. Just keep holding up. Did I hold up this one yet? This is Holden Naomi. It's weird saying Holden my name because there's the name of my cats. I say that all the time now. Anyway, I can say James and Naomi, or Holden and Nakata, which I don't know how that works. But anyway, so I thought that these comics were really good. They captured the characters of the show. They captured the spirit of the show. They stayed true to the world building. They developed certain things that would make sense in the world building. And as I said, like you can really tell that the creators of this comic really understood the Expanse. Now, as for how the comics look and how the art is, I'll put this one up. I am not, as I said, I'm not a comic reader, so I can't say, and I'm not really an expert on comic illustrations or art or anything like that. Ooh, but this looks cool. Look at that. Rossi blowing up. So I can't really say how good it is as comparing to normal comics, but I will say I liked it. I liked the format of the comics, the way they were, even though the drawings of these characters may look a bit different than how they appeared in the show, and aren't entirely consistent with each issue by issue, but I still love them. Like, I still thought, and especially like the action sequences, I like the way they were illustrated, I thought really worked. But again, I'm not an expert on that, so I can't really speak to that, but it worked for me, is what I'll say about that. So, I talked about all these praises that I gave it. Oh, this is a cool picture. See, there's Clarissa. You got to know that Clarissa, or Peaches, or Melba, however you want to call her, got to know that she was going to be in, because she's a member of the crew now. And so is Bobby, which is cool. But anyway, as per the ending of season 6. So I got into what I liked about them. So to get into what I didn't like so much about them is, I will say, the pacing was not done particularly well. And that's maybe something I noticed more for reading all 12 issues at the same time, is that it did feel like a lot of build-up, like they were really taking their time building the story, and then in the final issue it's just resolved very quickly. And so it was, a bit anticlimactic. Like, I would have liked a sort of bigger sort of resolution, or made it like a bigger deal about it. Like, the character building was great, even for the villains, who were characters invented for the comics, was done really well. Like, I could really got a tangible hold on these characters, and I thought they did a damn good job with them. But yeah, it just happened. Everything just resolved itself like too quickly for my taste. I think that they should have taken more time to really delve into it and sort of make the events matter more, maybe, I would say. But, so yeah, but that's my biggest complaint. I think that's really my only complaint. Like, I didn't, anything else about it, but the pacing is a big issue. Like, it's a major thing. But yeah, I can't think of anything else that really bothered me about them. Everything else, I did really enjoy it, and I would highly recommend it. As I was saying, like, look at stuff like this, the way it's illustrated, where it's the red tent when Naomi's in danger, like, and have like different tents when there's action. Again, that might be very common for comics. But I'm not a typical comic book reader, but just the way that it's done here, I think is so good. Like this one with Bobby floating, and yeah, this is so good. But anyway, I'm very glad I've read these, and I'm gonna keep them and perhaps read them again. And I would, highly recommend, if you haven't read them yet, to definitely, if you're a fan of The Expanse, for sure, my God, check these out. It is a good addition to it. You know, not as great as the books, so maybe if you haven't read the books, you should do that. but not quite as amazing as the show, but especially with this vacuum of material, The Expanse, which is a pretty much dead franchise at the moment. I loved getting this, and it was by someone who really loved The Expanse and understood The Expanse, and so it was really refreshing to get that. So my rating for Dragon Tooth out of 10, oh God, I'm stuck between an 8 and a 9. I think I'm gonna go. Actually, no, fuck it. I'm gonna go a 9. I'm gonna go 9 for Dragon Tooth. I'm not a typical comic book reader, so again, it's hard for me to rate it as a comic book, but as an Expanse fan, loved it, thought it really stuck with the characters, I really explored the world more, it filled in some of the gap of the 30-year gap, and as I just kept saying, the author understood it. And the illustrations were great, and the way that the story unfolded was great. The only issue is the pacing, though, which is quite a big issue, which is why I was tempted to give it an 8, but I think I'm over. So it was stuck between 8 and 9, but I'm just, the fact that I love seeing these characters again and how they felt like their characters, that kind of overrides the pacing issues for me. Partly. It's not enough to give it a 10, but I'm very glad that I got these comics. I'm very glad that I've read them all at once. So, yeah, I talked a bit before about these rumors I heard, which I don't think they're probably credible. There might be no credit to, because the source I'm hearing from, I don't think is particularly credible. But I heard these rumors that Apple Plus, or maybe at first it was Max, but then it was Apple Plus, want to get The Expanse, but they don't want to do books 7, 8, 9 because it's too directly following off of the show that Amazon still holds the rights to, so they want to kind of start anew. So they want to do material in between book 6 and 7, and that source implied that they would base it off of some of the material out there that takes place between those two books. But other than the Strange Dog story, which was already adapted for season 6, there's not really anything in between except for Dragon's Tooth. So I don't know if he was talking about Dragon's Tooth. But as much as I love these comics, I don't want to see them, if they're going to bring The Expanse back as this show, I don't want to see them adapt the goddamn books, for fuck's sake. Like, if they got to do something, then in between 6 and 7, then sure, yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, it's a good story, I like the characters, but if you're going to bring the show back, do fucking books 7, 8, and 9. Like, there's no point in bringing the show back if you're not going to do books 7, 8, and 9. It just isn't. As much as I love these comics, I don't want to see them adapt the goddamn books, for fuck's sake. Like, if you're going to bring the show back, do fucking books 7, 8, and 9. Like, there's no point in bringing the show back if you're not going to do books 7, 8, and 9. It just isn't. As much as I love these comics, don't waste time adapting them. Adapt the fucking books. But this is probably all moot point anyway, because it's probably never going to come back. I know that Alcon still wants it to, and they're still trying, so that's the one glimmer. That's why I'm not saying it's definitely dead. But it's hard since Amazon, I believe, just lost the rights for future material, but they still have the rights for the first 6 seasons firmly. So it makes it more difficult that another streaming service would want to pick it up. But yeah. So I'm doubtful that it will ever happen. It would be my dream come true if it did. But in the meantime, and probably the meantime will be forever because it probably will never come back, we got these. And this is definitely worth checking out. So that is it for my review of Dragon Tooth, the Expanse comic books. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. If you haven't checked out my other Expanse material, I'm not doing much at the moment because, as I said, not much going on with the Expanse, but I got a whole back catalog of Expanse stuff that I covered, lots of Expanse videos you can check out. But if you'd like to check out some of my newer stuff, I'm more into Star Trek at the moment, covering Star Trek Next Generation one episode at a time. About to cover House of the Dragon, which is about to come out, so that too. So yeah, if you're into those shows, you can check out my channel for those things. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.